So I'm Naveen Thoddil. I'm a senior cloud solution architect at Microsoft, focusing on identity. So in my presentation today, my agenda is quite different. My agenda is basically to advocate about the identity security, as most of us are basically in this role specifically related to either security or business enablement or identity engineering. So we'll be looking at what is passwordless, why do organizations need to look at passwordless, what are the values in going passwordless, and finally we look at what are the passwordless offerings from a Microsoft standpoint. We'll delve into some of the use cases and mapping of those use cases against the offerings. What's the right strategy or approach that we could take to enable an organization to go across that journey from having password to be passwordless. So as the name implies, passwordless is an ability to authenticate without providing a password. So password has been really great in digital transformation. Password has been that single security layer, but it's always been inconvenient for the users and the organizations to secure it, to remember it. And it's one of the biggest attack vectors that we have seen. Going passwordless is a solution that organizations are considering. Some of them have transformed themselves into a passwordless organization. Some of them are in the middle of being passwordless, and some of them are still thinking about going passwordless. So this should basically address the organizations that are in different legs of the journey to basically understand what is and why is Microsoft as an organization is promoting passwordless. And what I've seen is it's from a security standpoint, password is one of the biggest attack vectors. And then from a user perspective, it's harder to remember. With MFA, it's basically a next step of inconvenience as well, but still a secure mode, I would say. But what passwordless does do is that it just provides a device-based strong authentication vector that enables the organization to move from password to passwordless. And that's what the following slides are going to be looking into. Now, coming back to attacks on passwords, and why do I need to take that path is to basically showcase the necessity of moving to passwordless. We all know passwordless is a journey, and we need to look into why we need to take it. So from an organizational standpoint, if I look into, I've checked, like, there are a number of attack vectors that passwords encounter during a day-to-day, interaction with resources from an organizational standpoint. Microsoft has done different researches to basically understand what are these attack vectors and how does that affect an organization. So basically, taking a one step back, we see a different set of attack vectors over here. The most common ones are the password guessing. And what we've seen is that a 64% of the users either use a password for both enterprise, but there's a common password that they use for both enterprise as well as for the social logins or their personal accounts. And then we see about phishing attacks. We know that there's a lot of cybersecurity solutions out there that prevent the users from receiving the phishing emails in the first place, but we need to understand that still there are organizations that receive most of the organizations still receives about 0.5% of their email that their email server receives are phishing attempts. The key logging is becoming quite a popular, where the users are now logging in from anywhere, basically allowing them to use shared devices and sometimes public devices to access the enterprise resource. Network sniffing has been a common challenge, and we have better security controls now, but still a challenge where the passwords get leaked or compromised. The last but not the biggest one is not so much preemptive for me, but it's a stolen databases, which basically we know today that the web has almost like 168 million passwords that are available to a bad actor. So what is going passwordless to an organization mean, and what's that impact on a user looks like? So from an organizational perspective, I think that it gives a peace of mind to both your CISOs and your CIOs or your CTOs in the organization, because there's no more credentials that they need to be worried about. They have an identity, but that doesn't have a shared secret that they need to be securely storing it. From a user perspective, I see that I don't remember my password, but I'm good to go for my day-to-day activity. It doesn't stop my productivity. And that's what, from an experience perspective for a user, looks like. Now, if I take the security and convenience in a graphical format, I can basically put in all my authentication methodologies or the factors that I have today, and I can pretty much look into this and say passwords are the low security because it's a shared secret. The second thing that I look into is passwords, and I say that passwords with 2FA is really secure, but it's still an inconvenience for the users because you still have to remember it. And that's where the passwordless solution fills in, because it basically bridges that gap of security as well as convenience. And that's where I think people are looking into moving into passwordless, not just from a security perspective, but also improving the experience for the end users. Now, what does Microsoft's password replacement offering looks like? So Microsoft has been working from 2015 to find a way to secure our services platforms. And we started off a journey with Microsoft Windows Hello was one of our product offerings that kept evolving. So today we have 3 different solutions that enables an organization to go from password to being passwordless. And to take that into consideration, to look into that, the 3 solution sets that we have today are Windows Hello for Business, which is a solution that basically is available for all Windows 10 devices. And then we have the Microsoft Authenticator App, which is evolved from being a MFA solution to just now starting to be an enabler for organizations to use it as a passwordless solution. The last one that we have is we also support FIDO2 security keys that you can, pretty much we have relationship about with 15 different vendors today that allows you to bring in the FIDO2 tokens and integrate with our Azure Active Directory platform. Let's take a step into these 3 solution stacks to see what the values and offerings looks like from the stack perspective. So Windows Hello for Business is a biometric solution. And when I say biometric solution, a solution specifically for Windows 10 devices that comes with 2 different aspects. The device should have a biometric sensor, and the device should basically, if there's a device that has biometric sensors, then obviously that device has a TPM hardware module, which is the secure storage of your hardware where your keys are going to be stored. Now, taking a step back over here, Windows Hello for Business is specific to Windows devices, and it's supported from Windows 10 and above. There's 2 differences for Windows Hello for Business. Windows Hello for Business is similar to Windows Hello. So Windows Hello is specifically for your personal accounts, whereas the Windows Hello for Business is specifically for the business users and for the organizations that have either multiple levels of deployments today. Now, how does this all work together? So the common question that we have is, that's fine. You can have biometric solutions. People all know how biometrics work today, but is my biometric information stored in a centralized place? And the short answer to that is no. Your biometric is only used to unlock your hardware module within your device to take the key out. Apart from that, the passwordless solution does not use your biometric to be stored in any centrally located place. Your biometric always resides within your device. And the PIN is an alternate to biometric, and people always have this assumption that how can a PIN be more secure than a password? The short answer is PIN is used to unlock your hardware module. PIN does not leave your device. The password is a shared secret and it's symmetrical. So you have a pair of keys and the IAM platform that authenticates you have a pair of keys. Whereas with PIN, it's just an alternative module that allows you to authenticate and retrieve your key from your hardware module. Now, how does organization use Windows Hello for Business? That's going to be the adoption cases for us. What we have seen is today we have 3 million business users that have Windows Hello for Business. Now, what does that mean? Is we have almost 15,000 organizations that basically have Windows Hello for Business adopted into their enterprise landscape. And the single biggest adoption just being about 60K. And these are all the statistics that we have of October 2020. And what we are seeing is that every month on month, we are seeing close to 300,000 users adopting business. When I say 300,000 users, I'm just talking about the end users, not the organizations itself, adopting to Windows Hello for Business. I want to reduce my talk and see how this all comes together. So Lynn Robbins is a user who is trying to authenticate into his operating system. The organization has decided to go passwordless and enables Lynn Robbins to be part of a pilot program to basically enroll themselves for a passwordless. As soon as the user completes the initial enrollment, the user is prompted with a screen which gives him a clear description of what are they trying to set him up for. The user clicks on Setup, which basically now allows Windows to understand whether the device either has a facial recognition or a biometric sensor for your fingerprint, and automatically takes the control on whichever sensor that it identifies as part of that device. As part of the authentication or the enrollment, as part of the enrollment process, what we see here is that just to get an additional level of assurance, the user needs to complete their MFA setup before they complete the enrollment into the Windows Hello for Business. After the MFA is completed, we get into the next stage where we need to pop in a PIN, which is an alternative solution, so that if your device driver does not recognize your facial recognition or, for example, your fingerprint, you need an alternative method to get in. So the PIN is set as part of your enrollment that allows the user to basically have two levels to basically take the key out of the TPM modules. Once the data is registered within the platform, you basically get into the operating system without any hassle. And this is quite seamless in the way that how Windows Hello for Business could be adopted into an organization. Now, what we have seen now is an enrollment, and the next is someone who's basically trying to sign in on a day-to-day. The user logs in, the device identifies that Lynn Robin is a user who's already enrolled for enrolled for the Windows Hello for Business, and is prompted to basically complete that prompt. And once the user completes his facial recognition, the user is basically allowed to log in. So that completes one side of the solution, which is, or one side of the offerings from Microsoft, which is the Microsoft Windows Hello for Business. The next is the Microsoft Authenticator App. Now, the Microsoft Authenticator App has been available ever since 2013 or 2012. It provides a second layer of multi-factor authentication for application when it initially was brought in. It was basically available on multiple platforms like Android and your iOS. And what we have done now is there are organizations that does not have devices that have the TPM modules that can allow the user to go on to a passwordless journey with Windows Hello for Business. So the Microsoft Authenticator app today is a solution or an alternative to Windows Hello for Business for organizations that does not have a Windows 10 device, specifically with a TPM module added to that. So let's take a step up and see how the registration looks like for the Windows Hello for the Microsoft Authenticator app here. And if you see here, you can see that it had a prompt specifically asking for enable phone sign-in. So the user is already a consumer of Microsoft app, Authenticator app, and has been using that from an MFA perspective. And now when the user basically enrolls or comes into the platform or the applications now, he basically gets a prompt to look into enable the phone sign-in. The enable phone sign-in is an extension to your authentication app that allows you for the passwordless journey. So once the user completes their authentication, the user would basically be challenged for an MFA, which is basically through a push notification or a code depending upon what's been set up on the device. Once the user completes that, the user basically has completed their enrollment, and you can see that now the enable phone sign-in is changed to disable phone sign-in, which technically means that user has enabled the Microsoft Authenticator app for a passwordless authentication. Now, although the Authenticator app could also be used for an operating system or to log into your operating system without your password, in this specific scenario, we are looking at how the passwordless journey can be continued inside once you've authenticated into the operating system, but specifically trying to authenticate to an app. In this particular case, we are trying to authenticate into our first-party application, which is the Office app. And the user basically turns in his email. And once the email is dropped in, our home realm checks and identifies that this user belongs to a specific tenant, and the tenant has enabled the user for an Microsoft Authenticator App completion as a factor of authentication. User completes that authentication, and user basically ends up landing in their home screen. The last solution that we have from a passwordless offering today is our FIDO2 security keys. The FIDO2 security keys, the FIDO stands for Fast Identity Online, which is a security standard that is currently in use for passwordless authentication across all the IAM solution vendors today out there. So FIDO2 is, from a Microsoft standpoint, we basically support FIDO2. The Windows Hello for Business is a FIDO2 certified solution, and we also support FIDO2 from a security key perspective. So what that means is that there are FIDO2 enabled security keys, which look similar to your USB pen drives, which is enabled, or what we call it as the FIDO2 is basically a combination of WebAuthn and a CTAP. The CTAP is what allows, or what is the client device that authenticates for the WebAuthn protocols to basically work. So these two combinations basically comes together to be a FIDO2 solution. And from a Microsoft perspective, we have close to 15 vendors that we support. And it's similar to Windows Hello for Business. It's basically an ease of use scenario where FIDO2 security. But in my next slide, I'll be showing what is the difference, or when do we advocate customers to use FIDO2 keys as opposed to Windows Hello for Business. So if you have a one-to-one device today, you're better off going with Windows Hello for Business, because if that device supports the TPM module. Whereas if there are organizations where you have shared devices, let's say, for example, a retail organization where there is a shared devices for users to authenticate, then FIDO2 security key is most easier option for the organization to adopt to go to passwordless. And we'll see how we register a FIDO2 keys today. So basically, if the user is already enrolled or provisioned into our Azure Active Directory, the user can log into their mysignin.microsoft.com and basically go through the security info. As long as the IT has enabled the authentication factor within the specific tenant, the user can add a method, and this is when your security key would be enabled. If it is enabled on the tenant, would show up for the users within that specific tenant. So the user selects the security key. It just runs the user through a standard setup where they are asked to complete a multi-factor authentication. And once the user completes that, in this specific case, the user is prompted to select the device specifically for the FIDO2 authentication. And you can see that the user specifically selected the USB in this particular case, and the user will now be prompted to complete the setup. And again, similar to Windows Hello for Business, there is two prompts that the user needs to go into to complete it, which is basically inserting their USB port, the FIDO key into the USB port, followed by entering a PIN number. And these two factors basically completes the enrollment process for a FIDO2 key. The user taps on using their fingerprint to just complete the second factor after the PIN is completed. And the next is where we basically see how the user authenticates into the operating system using a FIDO2 key. User is prompted, user enters the PIN. Once the PIN is successful, the user is prompted to complete the sign-on using the USB device. And these are the three different options that we have today for organization who is willing to move from a password to a passwordless journey. And if you see, the common question that I get asked in the field is, how do I understand which solution is best for me? So if you basically see, we have evolved over time. Last year, we didn't have the Authenticator app to sign into Windows device. Today, we have that solution basically to allow Authenticator app to also allow a user to come into an operating system without a need of password. The common use cases that we normally have seen is signing into Windows 10 PC, again, Windows with a shared PC, sign into any Azure Active integrated web apps. This is one of the critical use cases that we have seen and we have recommended is as long as you are authenticating yourself or you're onboarding your applications to Azure Active Directory, the device authentication normally using your Windows Hello for Business or your passwordless sign-in would basically allow a user to have their tokens refreshed to give a seamless single sign-on experience. So the user doesn't need to have that experience of completing an operating system authentication and then moving out to an app. The Windows Hello for Business basically completes both an operating system level authentication. At the same time, it refreshes the token within the WAM cache today that we have that allows the other apps that are onboarded to Azure Active Directory to just complete a seamless single sign-on journey. The only challenge where you can't use your passwordless phone sign-in with Authenticator is for devices or the applications that are onboarded to Azure Active Directory today. The third-party sign-ins are basically app-dependent. So as long as the apps support the FIDO 2 protocol, specifically for Windows Hello for Business and for FIDO 2 security key, you're pretty much free to use that. Now that we have looked into what our passwordless offering looks like, I would like to take a time to see what's the right identity strategy, because most of them are quite clear about what the solution in the market looks like. But we always have this challenge of helping them, enable them, or set them up for success in the right track. And we at Microsoft have 4 levels that we constantly go ahead in advocating the right identity strategy, specifically to passwordless. So we start with develop, and we say that develop a solution or develop a password solution that basically allows you to reduce your usage of password. So in this specific case on develop over here, we're talking about incorporating Windows Hello for Business in your environment. Windows Hello for Business integrated with Azure Active Directory or with your on-premise Active Directory. What enables you is when the user logs in, the tokens within the WAM cache, as I said earlier, either the PRT token, which is used by the Azure Active Directory, or your Kerberos token used by on-premise Active Directory gets refreshed as part of that sign-on experience. What this enables is reduces the user's necessity to input passwords. Not just in your development stage, just by introducing Windows Hello for Business, you're just completing your 70% of your journey. But there could be, in an organization, what I've seen is there could be other workflows within the organizations that require some level of password. Windows Hello for Business reduces it, and it also has the ability to coexist. The second is where we basically recommend the organization to start the transition to reduce the dependency of passwords in your workflows. And by doing that, you would basically allow the organization to move to the next step. And the third level is a transition. And in the transition state, what we are looking for organizations to evaluate is the user does not use password to access any of their resources. The user doesn't change their password, or for that fact, the user doesn't know what their password is. And that's what the transition stage looks like. And the final is the eliminate, which is basically getting out the password from your identity directory. And that's the 4 stages to reach you up there. The common question I get asked is, passwordless is a great story. I love being passwordless, but we still have processes for temporary onboarding of users. And this is where Microsoft has went ahead and thought about this from providing temporary access pass. So what this temporary access pass does do is for users that are onboarded to an organization, maybe a new joiner, for example, the organization still needs to provide certain level of access or temporary access to get the users to enroll them into other strong factors. So we basically went ahead and defined a solution for temporary access pass. Temporary access pass allows an IT admin to create a short time passcode that allows the organization and that allows the user to basically go ahead and set other strong factors. So some of the typical use cases are user is provisioned into the platform. The user is provided with the temporary access pass authentication method for that specific user. User goes into their security info and completes their registration for the other strong factors using either the Authenticator app or the FIDO tool. And the second stage where the temporary access pass has really been useful for organizations is when they have completely onboarded themselves into a Microsoft, the passwordless journey. They basically have challenges for the users to either reset their FIDO tokens or reset their Authenticator app. And the temporary access pass allows the users to have that temporary, have the temporary access into their security profile to reset that FIDO. Now, I want to conclude the whole discussion by saying, if you're still thinking about passwords, the short answer in my conclusion is passwords are expensive and insecure. What our study shows is, these are not the Microsoft studies, but it's a cybersecurity incident report of 2018 by OTA, and the Verizon's cybercrime case studies of 2017 shows that 73% of passwords are duplicates. 81% of breaches leveraged passwords. It's compromised password. Every data breach is about 3.86 million in average. Your help desk is getting about 20% of password resets. And just between 2016 and 2017, we had 279% of increase in security incidents specific to passwords. So if you're still dependent on passwords, these are just the motivational things to get to think about to move to passwordless journey. And I want to take this time to thank everyone for listening in. I'm going to copy paste these resources into a chat that would help you to basically read more about our passwordless solutions and our passwordless and start thinking about your passwordless journey. Thank you.